My name is Amanda Regan, and I am the Director of Customer Experiences here at Swivl. We have created this series to support educators who are creating learning communities within their organization to foster continuous adaptability. We want to partner with you to figure out how to build a more adaptable community in your school. And we'll talk more about our tool Reflectivity and how it supports this after we hear from Greg. For more information about future webinars, you can visit our AI webinar website. Conceithia is going to drop that link in the chat as soon as it is enabled. Hopefully, we'll be able to get you straight to there as soon as this is finished. And right now, I want to introduce our presenter. This is the first presenter in our series. We're excited to have Greg Kulowiec with us. With 2 decades in education, Greg brings a unique approach to professional learning that blends his experience as a high school history teacher and professional learning provider. Currently, he's the Director of Technology at the Triton Regional School District and the lead learner and principal of the Kulowiec Group. Greg understands the opportunities and challenges presented when introducing technology into schools and classrooms. Greg, you're up. We're excited. I'm going to pass the mic over to you. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. So we have a packed session this evening, so I say we just jump right into it and let's get going. So in terms of an outline of what we're going to try to cover, it's really broken into 3 kind of key components, 3 parts of the session. What I want to do when we're kicking off is try to paint like a broad brush and a kind of expand your perspective on what we mean when we talk about AI, and especially AI in education. I think it's pretty normal to just kind of align when anyone says AI or using artificial intelligence in educational setting, it's directly to kind of text generative AI. Like I put my text prompt in, I get text out. So we'll try to broaden the perspective a bit there. And honestly, I think sometimes back to like, I remember the first session, PD session I ever gave on AI and EDU was like 2017, 2018. And it was like, oh, it's only text. It can't touch creativity. Like only humans can do that sort of thing. Don't worry about it. And now obviously things are quite different. So we'll address some of those ideas. Then in the middle section, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about kind of like 6 key principles that I like to think about whenever a school or a district or a leadership team or even educators are thinking about how do we start to have meaningful conversations around artificial intelligence. And, you know, all 6 principles might not align with your thinking, but ideally 1 or 2 of them will kind of get you shifting your thinking in a way that's kind of positive and optimistic and looking for opportunities of how these really powerful tools can have a positive impact on your job as an educator, and then maybe even on the experience of your students as well. And then kind of woven into that too, and a little bit separate, I don't want to just go big picture and conceptual. This has to be really practical. So I want to weave in some really practical kind of 5-foot view in a classroom at your desk. Like what are some things you can do practically right away to leverage these tools? So with that, I always like to calibrate the groups that I work with. So you can, it looks like we have the chat up and running. Yeah, it looks like we're good to go. So in terms of your comfort level, if you want to drop a number in the chat, if you're quadrant 1, it means you're a frequent user of AI tools, but you're still kind of uncomfortable. Like what's going on? I'm not quite sure how to leverage this thing. Maybe my prompt writing isn't so refined and I'm just kind of nervous about what the prospects are. If you're quadrant 2, you're a frequent user, wildly comfortable, and I can hand the webinar over to you and you can take it from here. If you're quadrant 3, you're comfortable using the tools, but you don't use them very often. And then if you're quadrant 4, you're not really a heavy user, kind of uncomfortable. And any of these are reasonable. Like a session I did earlier this afternoon, it was kind of heavy on the 3-4, and wherever you are is completely reasonable. So drop in your number. I kind of like to get a sense of where the group is. I'm so obsessed. Okay, that's awesome. All right, so we have a little kind of calibration in the group, and this can be a really helpful thing to use in your district or your school as well. I love calibrating groups in these 1, 2, 3, 4 because it helps maybe mix unique groups and have meaningful conversations about where you are now and where you might end up by the end of the session. So what I often see is that, like I said earlier, folks that think about AI, they immediately go, oh, AI equals text. And like, that's absolutely the case, right? Whether you're using ChatGPT or I don't know if folks have heard or used Bard, but Bard is Google's version. But my favorite one is actually the middle one is Claude. So Claude is a relatively new AI platform. What I like about it is you can upload 5 files at a time and then interact with those files. So as an educator, I'm thinking uploading PDFs and turning them into document-based questions, or looking for similarities between readings, or turning readings into station rotation activities and extracting discussion questions out of them. So that's what I see all the time is AI equals text, but it's also generative audio. So 11 Labs will let you turn text into audio in any voice that you want. The middle one, that's Music LM from Google. They will allow you to do a text prompt to get a music output. And if you think about blending these things together now, and I'll give an example of this a little bit later, you can essentially use AI to help create a podcast where you can interview an expert, you can make bumper music, you can make these creative outputs, and it's not just text. We might layer the text output with the audio creation. And then the one that I think is like really in its infancy, but has tremendous potential here, is generative video. And I think this is the one that catches folks off guard when they're not aware of this stuff already, like typing a prompt and getting a video output. And to highlight the fact that this world and this topic is moving so quickly, the icon on the left here, this little green R, is Runway, or Runway ML. And they actually pushed out an update last night where you can write your text prompt. You know, I need a scene of like a forest where it's raining slightly and I'm on a dirt path. And what you can do now is even act as a director and say, we're going to walk forwards in the scene, or we're going to pan from left to right, or we're going to zoom out. And I think about it in terms of education of, imagine a student who has a vision of what they want to create, but they don't have a drone or a camera, or they don't have the resources, but now there's this massive barrier that's been removed, and they can make these really exceptionally creative outputs with the ideas in their head and no more barrier to expression or creating. And then of course we have generative images. And I think increasingly as well, all of these tools are embedded in the tools that we already use. So if you're a Canva user already, and I know that they have a webinar coming up later in this series, if you're a Canva user, text to image creation is there, or within Adobe Express, text to image creation. Like, these things are embedded in the tools we use, and it's bigger than just ChatGPT and text output. Now, in terms of just kind of being really efficient, we're not going to dig way into prompt writing, but I like everyone to have kind of a really solid baseline, and then we can jump into some principles and examples. So you can find countless approaches to prompt writing. This is the model I use all the time. I prep the AI, give it a clear target for what it's about to do. I'll often tell it, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to, and then I tell it really clearly what it's going to do. Then I assign a characteristic, tell it what it is, what skill it has. You're an expert educator, you're a master historian, you're exceptionally skilled at universal design for learning, like something that relates to what you're looking for the output to be, and give it that role or characteristic. Then I give it exceptionally intricate instructions, tell it exactly what you want it to do, what rules it needs to follow. In many ways, giving it constraints is more powerful than telling it what you want. And I'll give a model of that later. And then, like I was just kind of alluding to, lots of limitations and boundaries and expectations, the length, the way it's going to present it in a table, in a bullet list. If you're making a rubric, tell it exactly what you want the rubric to look like in terms of the output. And then we have this really powerful kind of approach to writing really solid prompts with whatever tool you're going to use. So now that we have the kind of foundational skills and kind of a big picture landscape, let's look at some key principles. Now, these key principles, I want to talk about one of 6 ideas, and then maybe talk more specifically with an illustration or an example or a model of that. And these are the ones that I keep coming back to, because I think this is how I like to think about what the impact of AI will be in a classroom. So I think about it in terms of being active versus passive. What I'm exceptionally worried about as a director of technology, as a parent to 2 elementary age kids who are going to be using these tools likely moving forward, is active versus passive use. And what I mean by that is how the tools are increasingly embedded in everything we use. So not in an education setting yet, not like in Google Workspace for education, but if you have a personal Google or Gmail account, you can enable Bard inside of a Google Doc, and you open up your Google document and there's a blue button waiting for you. What would you like me to do for you right now? And I look at that and go, that's really passive use, right? You didn't go in with an idea. You didn't go in with idea, something that you've generated. You're not going in acting as a thought partner. You're like, here, offload, do the work for me. And that's really concerning, because I think there's value in mulling over your own ideas, doing hard things, kind of like grappling with challenging thoughts before you go actively, this is what I'm thinking, this is where I sit now. Now I might use AI actively to challenge my thoughts or expand my thinking. So there's actually a really helpful piece in the chat, in my slides. I'm going to drop it in the chat for you all. I can't recommend, let me see if I can drop this to everyone. Yes, I can. There we go. I can't recommend reading this one enough. It's from Ethan Mollick, and it's called Setting Time on Fire. And I just think it's the most helpful piece to think about what are the implications of that big blue button. So another principle is redefining skills. So I often think about the kinds of assignments I would give my students and what skills and abilities were really embedded in those assignments. Not what the task is, but what is the skill we're working on, and how AI is going to force us to really confront the kind of skills that are valuable now and what might be more valuable moving forward. Not that it isn't now, but maybe increase value moving forward. I like to think about it this way. When schools went one-to-one and got devices, right? I remember when my classroom went one-to-one with iPads over a decade ago. The critical skill was searching. So can we teach kids how to search and find information and dig for information? Exceptionally valuable. It's still valuable, but in an AI world, what I keep coming back to is now the skill is asking questions, not just searching for information. We don't necessarily even need to dig for information. We can get it presented to us in the way we want if we know how to ask questions, be curious and logical at the same time. So anytime I talk about AI with educators who are maybe newer to it or like, hey, I'm trying to wrap my head around this capacity, it's a genius on the other side of the door that you cannot open the door and talk to. You have to be curious and creative. You have to ask questions, ask them logically, and slide a piece of paper under the door and keep your fingers crossed that you crafted the question in a way that makes sense. And if you did, you'll get solid information back. But then the other emerging critical skill is evaluating what you get back. So you cannot use these tools if you cannot verify the information that you're receiving. So we go from digging and finding and searching to asking, being curious, logical, and critically thinking and evaluating as a relevant skill. And it's echoed by the World Economic Forum. Flexibility, resilience, self-awareness, curiosity. These are 2023 top skills. Skills on the rise, self-awareness, curiosity, lifelong learning, flexibility, agility. Like these tools are going to shift. The landscape is going to change. Can we adapt to it as things are changing so quickly? And my third kind of core principle is documentation and transparency. I was really fortunate to be able to work with high school students at the end of last year, and I asked some high school seniors, they were tasked with making a digital children's storybook using AI tools to help them create the images, create the audio, create the background music, craft the story. But one of the expectations was that they were going to document everything they did with every AI tool. Screenshots, prompts, links to prompts, outputs that they received, how the output impacted their thinking and their writing. And that was just embedded in the experience. Everything had to be documented. And I think taking that approach is really helpful. It wasn't, we're going to lock this down, you can't use it. It's no, use it. But it also forced them to be thoughtful about when they were using it. So for every small, tiny little discrete task where it wasn't really needed, why use it if we have to spend more time documenting than just creating ourselves? But when they went in with their own original thought or their vision, then they can use the tool to help them. And it was acting as idea number 4, a thought partner. This is language I've been using consistently since these tools went public last year and they emerged on the scene really quickly. As opposed to outsourcing our thinking and going, here, ChatGPT or Bard or Claude or whoever, do the work for me. I've been using with students, with educators, this idea of AI as a thought partner. So can we go in with our own original thought and use it to challenge our thinking, to look for holes in our thinking, to enhance our thinking, to allow us to maybe act more creatively? I mean, you can even push this a little bit further. I shared a link earlier by Ethan Mollick. He's taking really interesting perspective and he's sharing ideas around like poor writing is no longer allowed or poor writing is no longer viable. Like everyone can be a good writer, but then that also begs the question of like, I love this question around, have we over-indexed on writing as the only mechanism or the most dominant mechanism to measure student intelligence or student understanding? So these tools as a thought partner, have the opportunity to kind of level the playing field for everyone. So no longer is that barrier to creating written text so high for every student anymore if we're going to allow them to have access to these tools. So as an example here, AI is a thought partner. You're going to act, here's a screenshot of a prompt. You'll act as a thought partner and engage in a debate with me about a selected topic. I'll take one perspective, you'll take the other. The debate will begin when I provide a statement or an overview of the topic. It'll be followed up by my first statement. Based on my statement, you'll create a reply. I will reply to your statement with my next point. You'll provide a subsequent reply, and you can only create 4 sentences at a time. So this is the idea where students can map out arguments they want to make on a topic and then test their arguments and test their perspective against an expert, because they might not have access to any other kind of like valid opponent in this debate. Enhancing creativity. I love this one. I remember I was teaching an intensive course with some students at Mercersburg Academy. It's an independent school in Pennsylvania. And there was a student in the class who had her camera around her neck almost every day, and relatively engaged in this week-long AI course we were teaching. And then Photoshop released the beta version of their generative fill, where you can like circle a part of a picture, type an idea, and the image gets edited immediately. And she kind of lit up, and that turned into her wanting to take her original art and modify it in ways she could see in her head, but maybe didn't have the technical skill to pull it off, and then create an art installation on campus. So like AI has the ability to remove barriers and create new opportunities for students. I'll share a story in a little bit about students who created a podcast episode and debated that topic they were interested in and allow them to enhance their creativity. Or when these text to video generative AI tools become more mature, and students will be able to type out a scene that they have in their head, or interactions between 2 characters, or a landscape that they can't create on their own, but they have the vision for it, and they can turn that into a documentary or a piece of a video that they're creating. So another really cool example of like AI to enhance creativity. There's this wild tool called Skybox. Skybox lets you type ideas, and it creates a 3-dimensional equirectangular VR world. You can take that VR world, hold on a second. I'll let this run in the background. You can take that VR world that you create, download it out of Skybox, and then drop it into an education platform called CoSpaces. And I was telling my Swivl friends this story earlier. I had a student who was taking these worlds that they were creating, dropping them into CoSpaces, adding characters, and then narrating poetry of their own with background music that they created based off of a text prompt with an AI background music generator. So like, this is wild that you can do this sort of thing. And imagine the ability for a student to go, I want you to hear my poetry in a world that I envision the poetry being conveyed in, not just on paper, but it's immersive and there's sound to go with it. And you get to hear the student narrate their poem. Like, that's by far enhancing creativity. And now the last one here is targeting equity. And I think this is super critical. As a director of technology, I don't love the idea of blocking these tools on school networks. I think as it creates a massive divide. So think about the student who can go home, has resources, support, family members, whoever it might be, who can show them how to use these tools, or has a sibling or a friend who's going to show them how to use these tools. And now that student essentially is a personal tutor at home that can help them with any task they might have. Then you might have a student who's in an environment at school where the resource is blocked. They might not have the support, resources, capacity at home. And now we're just kind of creating a greater divide. And what I mean by that is a student who might go home with their assignment that they wrote and the rubric they've been given, and they can go to ChatGPT or whatever text generative tool and go, hey, I have my writing, I have the rubric, I want you to give me feedback right now. My teacher hasn't done it yet. And now I can get targeted feedback on how I land on each criteria. If I'm a 1, 2, 3, or 4, suggestions to improve, evidence of why I'm a 4 on that specific domain. So the students who know how to do this, they now have what is essentially a high-cost tutor at their disposal on any device they can get access to. And so that's why I think it's critical that we don't create this equity issue by blocking these tools. We embrace it in our schools, teach students how to leverage it as a active use thought partner that can give students more access than they ever could otherwise. And ultimately what I keep worrying about is like, where is AI going to land? Will it be an assessment creator? Like, we can go to tools to create multiple choice assessments very quickly. I don't even want to go down that path. Will we land as a productivity tool? It'll help me write emails faster. What I really want to see are these bottom two. It's a thought partner and it's an idea and creativity instigator. We go with our own ideas. We've grappled, we've struggled, we've talked to people. Now I want to see how I can refine them, enhance them, grow them, look for weaknesses in them, get feedback on my thinking. So a few more use cases just to kind of like wrap up to make it super practical. Wildly practical one right here. I'm an educator and I have students with lots of learner variability coming into my classroom, and I have one bit of text. And now I can have ChatGPT level that and make me a 7, a 9, and an 1100 Lexile level piece of reading. So that's just wildly practical. What we can also do, let me just get to it live right now. If you're looking for, and this is interesting, right? So there's tools that are built specifically to do this sort of thing, or you can learn how to do it with ChatGPT or any text generative AI tool. So Diffit allows you to do the same thing. Drop a link to an article, upload a text excerpt, describe something, and then you can get leveled material for whatever you need, right? So we can do it manually, or you can do it with a pre-made tool. Here's another like really practical example. I talked about Bard earlier. So Bard allows you to upload multiple files. And in this instance, you know, my lens is as a history teacher. I uploaded 2 speeches by Dr. King, Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech and his letter from a Birmingham jail. The AI will act as an expert educator and create 2 unique close reading activities that pull excerpts from each reading and ask students to explain the connections and the significance of each of the quote excerpts. And then it goes on to do the work for you. So one of the ways I think about this is like, yeah, it's doing some heavy lifting, but it also could free me up to have more energy, more capacity, and more ability to engage and talk with students in class, because I'm not staying up till 11 o'clock or midnight making this. I can have it generated very quickly. And now I have like really meaningful use of time in class. Another just really easy one, pulling transcripts of YouTube videos and then getting summaries, key ideas, and then discussion questions out of them. So could be really helpful in class. Here's one of my favorite ways, and this goes back to last year when ChatGPT first emerged. My daughter's in 6th grade now, 5th grade last year, doing a Genius Hour project, and she picked nature versus nurture, right? It's a challenging idea to explain. It's nuanced, and I was having a hard time kind of finding resources that were valuable and helpful and age and grade level specific. So AI is super powerful at creating analogies, simplifying complex ideas, and turning ideas into stories. So you're an expert educator, skilled at explaining complex concepts in exceptionally accessible ways for students. You're going to explain the concept of nature versus nurture to a 5th grade student. When you create your explanation, you'll create 3 analogies that consist of 2 paragraphs in length each. Do you understand? And it goes for it. And then we have the gardener and the seeds, and 2 other analogies to go with it that become so much more accessible. So imagine creating like a station rotation activity out of this. That's like wildly powerful. This is my favorite one, and then we'll start to pull it together. It's the trick of asking ChatGPT to ask you 10 questions. So you're going to help me write a new World War II unit. I'm new to teaching this. And before you just go off and start creating it, ask me 10 questions about what I believe in, what I want to emphasize, what my philosophy is, maybe what standards I'd like to include, what vocabulary I want, what the experiences are going to be like. As you answer the questions, sometimes I walk away from the AI tool because now I've got my own thinking moving forward and I can build it on my own. But just answering the questions gives the tool more context and allows you to create exactly what you want. So really big picture, like if we back up a bit, brainstorming, idea generation, differentiating content, being a content creator, creating analogies, simplifying complex ideas, providing alternate perspectives, like lots of powerful ways to think about this. So just one more creative output, and then we'll get to just wrapping it up. So one of my favorite examples is students that I worked with where they got to pick a topic. They prepared 3 to 4 key arguments about that topic, and then they debated with ChatGPT. They had to write a really thoughtful prompt, have a back and forth with ChatGPT. They then took the back and forth, took its text, dropped it into 11 Labs or UberDuck, turned it into audio, recorded their arguments, and then edited it down in whatever, GarageBand, Audacity, whatever they wanted to use, Soundtrap, and they made their own custom background music. So they created these 4 or 5 minute podcast episodes debating a concept, but the expert was ChatGPT, text converted into audio. And even in talking to them, they were like, oh no, we understand this idea at such depth because they had to research it, engage with text, listen to the audio, edit the audio, record their voice, mix it down, and then play it back to the class. So just a really creative way to think about how you might use AI. And it's really just opening up creative capacity for students. So as I pull my kind of thinking together, what I want to share with you is the one new way I'm thinking about how do we kind of generate AI superpowers. And these are the 3 I'm settling on now. So one is curiosity. So can you ask good questions? Can you be curious and maybe move out of a rut of your own thinking to be curious about what you might be able to create? Can you write logically? So can you be curious and logical at the same time? And can you be persistent with how you're using the tools? So if you don't get the output you want, can you look at what you're doing and go, oh, how might I shift this to get a better output? Or how might I be more logical in my prompt? Or how might I be more curious in what I'm asking to get out of it to have a better output here? So those are my 3 AI superpowers if you really want to take advantage of these tools. So, my gosh, it's 7:59. I did it. Yay. I just want to offer an opportunity for all of the folks that are kind of taking the time this evening. What I do outside of kind of working in a district, I provide professional learning and build self-paced courses for educators. So I have a self-paced course around exploring artificial intelligence. For all of you lovely people that are joining us this evening, if you drop a code into my Teachable page, you'll be able to get a discount on that. And I'm going to drop this in the chat if anybody is interested. There we go. It's the Kulowiec Group /AI course. And if you go there and use the code Swivl30, and I'll drop that in the chat for you as well, you will get a discount on that course. If you wanted to take a 3-part course that I constantly update and keep up to date, and it explores AI from 3 kind of big perspectives and goes hands-on and lots of video tutorials. So I encourage you to check that out. I'm going to head back up to slide 1 as well. So my contact information is there. If anybody wants to reach out, have questions, want to just connect on social or via email. Otherwise, we did it with no time to spare. I want to thank my friends at Swivl. You all are awesome for pulling this together. And I hope everyone got a new idea or 2 out of the session this evening.
Greg, thank you so much. You taught us a ton. There were 3 skills that you mentioned that I really want to learn a lot more about. So I wanted to show you and everybody here how we can explore that in our product, Reflectivity. You can see here you have the AI is the topic, and then these are a bunch of different skills that people can develop while using AI. The one that I'm particularly interested in is enhancing creativity. So if I wanted to click that, I could join another learning community. You can see I have a bunch of colleagues that are already exploring this option. So I want to join them. Like once I join them, I'm put into the activity board, and you can see all of the different ways that the people are that are on my team are exploring the enhanced creativity topic or skill. And then when you do that, I can click into it and just kind of figure out what it is that I want to do. So it asks me the prompt, like, where will you be in a month on enhancing creativity? And my goal is to be informed about this. So in order to build momentum and make some progress towards being informed, my idea would be to read an article, because I love to read about different things. That's my favorite way of attacking new things. So I'm going to go ahead and click next. And then it just shows me, again, it puts me back in here in this. The product will then send you, in about a week, it will prompt you to come back to it and let us know exactly what you did. It will have you check in. You'll come in, you'll figure out how it's going. You said you wanted to be informed about creativity. And I'm feeling pretty motivated by enhancing my creativity. I learned a lot. So I plan to read an article. I did read an article. And here's what happened. I can go into a little bit of a deeper reflection here. And I read the Edutopia article, and I realized that there are so many things in that creativity space that I need to spend a lot more time on this particular skill. All right. So what am I going to do next? I think I am going to join a learning community. I imagine Greg has a lot of followers over there on Twitter. And so I might start following him and have this conversation with a broader group. So I'm going to join this community. I'm going to come back here, and that is my next activity, is going to join a learning community. I can see what all of my other friends are doing here at school. If I wanted to, I could share some information, and I can see here that there are community members in this space that have also read an article. This is similar to the one that I wrote, and then we can have a discussion about it. In this particular instance, nobody shared the link to that article, but that is also possible up there in the what happened. You can specify what Edutopia article you read, and then you can have a deeper discussion about what happened here and continue your growth trajectory. If you want to learn a little bit more about Swivl and reflectivity, you can stay on after this webinar if you're interested, or you can just follow this QR code over to our webpage.